My daughter-in-law's smug parents thought they could mock me in Japanese at Thanksgiving dinner, assuming I'd never understand. Their laughter stopped when I replied in flawless Japanese, exposing their cruel words. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. The commendation certificate trembled slightly in my weathered hands as I polished my reading glasses for the third time that afternoon. 67 years of living had taught me that some memories demanded crystal-clear vision. Even when you'd rather leave them blurred, the faded ink on the military document seemed to mock me. Distinguished Service, Pacific Theater, 1979-1982. As if those 3 years in Japan had been nothing more than a bureaucratic footnote. My study walls bore witness to a lifetime of careful organization. Every book spine aligned perfectly, each photograph positioned with military precision. The Japanese culture texts on the upper shelf caught afternoon light filtering through Venetian blinds, their presence both comforting and complicated. These weren't decorative pieces. They were tools of understanding, weapons of knowledge accumulated over decades of patient study. The phone's shrill cry shattered my contemplation like artillery fire. My jaw tightened involuntarily as I reached for the receiver, muscle memory from countless emergency calls during my service years. The timing felt deliberate, intrusive, as if someone had been watching through my windows, waiting for this exact moment of vulnerability. "Hello, Dad Lonnie." Della's voice poured through the speaker like honey over broken glass. Too sweet, too bright, too perfectly timed. That saccharine tone always preceded something unpleasant. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Everything about this call felt choreographed. Della never phoned on Wednesday afternoons. She knew my schedule better than my own calendar, understood that this was my time for sorting through military papers, confronting old ghosts in the privacy of my sanctuary. My free hand unconsciously touched the edge of a black and white photograph tucked beneath the commendation. 5 soldiers standing outside a Tokyo temple, myself among them, young and naive about what lay ahead. "Chester and I want to invite you for Thanksgiving dinner next week," she continued, her enthusiasm feeling manufactured, rehearsed. "My parents will be there too. Herman and Cora flew in from California yesterday." The photograph's edges crumpled slightly under my grip. Herman and Cora. Their names alone conjured memories of awkward conversations, subtle dismissals, cultural corrections delivered with surgical precision. 3 previous encounters had established a pattern I'd tried desperately to ignore, hoping family harmony might eventually triumph over personal dignity. "That sounds wonderful, Della." The words emerged from my mouth like trained soldiers, disciplined, appropriate, hiding the tactical assessment already forming in my mind. "What should I bring?" "Oh, nothing special. Just be yourself, Dad Lonnie." Just be yourself. The phrase carried weight beyond its simple syllables. Herman and Cora had made it abundantly clear during our previous meetings that myself wasn't quite sufficient for their standards. My American wine selections were interesting. My chopstick technique needed gentle correction. My stories about military service in Japan were met with polite smiles that never reached their eyes. The pen felt heavy in my fingers as I reached for my desktop calendar, its weight multiplied by the significance of what I was about to write. November 20th stared back at me, blank and waiting. This wouldn't be just another family dinner. It would be another chapter in an ongoing cultural examination, where I perpetually failed to meet unspoken requirements. My military training had taught me to recognize patterns, to anticipate enemy movements before they materialized. 3 encounters with Herman and Cora had established their strategy. Subtle superiority wrapped in helpful suggestions. Cultural condescension disguised as educational opportunities. They spoke about Japan with the authority of natives, dismissing my 3 years of service there as tourist experience rather than genuine cultural immersion. 6:30 work for you? Della's voice pulled me back to the present moment. "Perfect timing," I replied, though nothing about this felt perfect. The pen hovered over the date, trembling slightly like my hands had with the commendation certificate. Writing this appointment would make it real, would commit me to another evening of smiling through microaggressions and swallowing pride with every course. But family was family. Chester had married Della despite knowing about our complicated history. Their happiness mattered more than my personal comfort, didn't it? The question mark hung in my mind like smoke from old battles, unresolved and persistent. My fingers tightened around the phone receiver as I prepared to seal my fate in ink. The calendar page seemed to expand before me, November 20th, growing larger and more ominous with each passing second. 3 encounters had taught me what to expect. Perhaps the 4th would finally teach me what to do about it. The pen descended toward paper with the inevitability of gravity, ready to mark another date with destiny. The ink dried on November 20th as I set my pen down with deliberate precision, the date now permanently etched into my schedule like a scar. 5 days had crawled past since Della's call, each one bringing me closer to another evening of cultural warfare disguised as family dinner. I'd spent those days in careful preparation, not just selecting wine and rehearsing pleasantries, but steeling myself for battle. Standing on Chester and Della's front porch at exactly 6:30, I adjusted my tie one final time and checked the wine bottle's position in the gift bag. Chateau Montelena, Chardonnay, 2019, American Vineyard, premium price, deliberate choice. If Herman was going to critique my selections, he'd have to work harder this time. The front door opened before I could knock, revealing Della's practiced smile. Her eyes held that familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety, the same expression she'd worn during previous dinners when anticipating her parents' reactions to my presence. "Dad, Lonnie, perfect timing." She accepted my kiss on the cheek while simultaneously scanning the gift bag in my hands. "Chester's just finishing up in the kitchen." The house smelled of teriyaki and jasmine rice, an aromatic battlefield where American and Japanese cuisines had reached an uneasy ceasefire. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across hardwood floors, creating an atmosphere of domestic tranquility that felt fragile, temporary. Herman emerged from the living room like a general surveying conquered territory. His handshake was firm, professional, calibrated to demonstrate strength without revealing effort. At 72, he moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to deference, his expensive casual wear perfectly pressed despite a day of travel. "Lonnie, good to see you again." His smile was precise, measured, revealing teeth whitened to an unsettling uniformity. "I trust the drive over wasn't too difficult." "Traffic was light," I replied, matching his formal tone while internally cataloging the subtle dismissal embedded in his phrasing. Not, "How are you?" or "Glad you could make it," but an assumption that simple navigation might challenge my capabilities. Cora appeared beside her husband with the synchronized timing of long marriage. Her bow was shallow but deliberate, a cultural gesture that highlighted my lack of reciprocation. She wore a silk blouse decorated with cherry blossom patterns, the fabric catching light in ways that suggested considerable expense. "Thank you for joining us, Lonnie-san." The honorific felt performative, designed to demonstrate her cultural authenticity rather than show genuine respect. "I brought homemade miso soup. The recipe has been in my family for generations." The gift bag felt heavier as I extended it toward Della. "I brought wine for dinner." Herman accepted the bottle with the enthusiasm of someone examining evidence. His fingers turned it slowly, reading the label with theatrical concentration. The pause stretched uncomfortably long, each passing second amplifying the silence. "Oh, American wine. Interesting choice." His tone carried the weight of diplomatic disappointment, polite enough to avoid direct offense while clearly communicating judgment. "Napa Valley produces some adequate vintages." Adequate. The word hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield, acrid and persistent. My military training kicked in automatically. Maintain composure, assess enemy positions, prepare for escalation while preserving strategic options. Chester appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron decorated with cartoon sushi rolls, his smile stretched tight across his face. "Dinner's almost ready. Should we move to the dining room?" The dining table had been set with Della's good china, each place setting arranged with military precision. Herman and Cora claimed seats facing the window, positioning themselves to observe while maintaining tactical advantage. I found myself across from them, feeling like a defendant facing judgment. Conversation flowed around safe topics, weather, travel, Chester's recent promotion, while underlying tensions simmered beneath surface politeness. Cora served her miso soup with ceremonial precision, explaining proper consumption techniques with the patience of someone addressing a particularly slow student. "In Japan, we teach children to hold chopsticks properly from age 3, she observed, as I navigated my soup with deliberate care. Her demonstration was flawless, each movement calculated to highlight my comparative clumsiness. Muscle memory develops early, much easier than learning as an adult. I try to learn new things at any age, I replied, adjusting my grip while fighting the urge to reveal just how well my muscle memory actually functioned. 3 years in Japan had taught me more than tourist-level chopstick techniques, but admitting that would complicate tonight's delicate balance. Herman leaned back in his chair, wine glass catching candlelight as he swirled the Chardonnay with professional expertise. The terroir here lacks complexity compared to Japanese sack brewing traditions. Americans focus on quantity over craftsmanship. Each comment built upon previous ones, creating a cumulative weight that pressed against my chest like gathering storm clouds. Della nodded along with appropriate enthusiasm, while Chester studied his plate with increased intensity. The family dynamics revealed themselves through silence as much as speech. Who spoke, who listened, who chose strategic invisibility when tensions escalated. My eyes tracked the subtle communications passing between Herman and Cora, the meaningful glances that suggested conversations continuing beyond spoken words. They exchanged a look loaded with significance, a moment of wordless connection that excluded everyone else at the table. Something was coming, something planned, coordinated, designed to test limits I hadn't even realized we were approaching. The gentle clink of dessert spoons against porcelain filled the dining room as conversation settled into that comfortable post-meal rhythm where defenses naturally lowered. Della moved between kitchen and table, clearing plates with practiced efficiency while maintaining her hostess' smile. The wine had done its work, shoulders relaxed, voices softened, and the earlier tension seemed to dissolve into domestic tranquility. Herman leaned back in his chair, swirling the remaining Chardonnay with casual expertise. His business confidence had returned, the wine critique forgotten in favor of broader cultural observations. Cora dabbed her lips delicately with her napkin, preparing for what appeared to be a private comment. The miso soup was exceptional tonight, Chester offered, attempting to bridge the lingering awkwardness from earlier exchanges. His diplomatic skills had improved over years of managing family dinners, though the strain still showed around his eyes. My grandmother's recipe, Cora replied with practiced modesty, though pride colored her voice. Passed down through 4 generations. Some traditions cannot be replicated. The subtext hung in the air like incense, another gentle reminder of authenticity versus imitation, heritage versus adoption. My military training had taught me to recognize patterns, and this evening's conversation had followed a predictable trajectory of subtle corrections and cultural superiority. Cora caught Herman's eye across the table, a meaningful glance that preceded their private communications. She leaned toward his ear, her voice dropping to what she assumed was an inaudible whisper. My hearing, sharpened by years of military service and surveillance training, caught every syllable with crystal clarity. Kono baka na furui heitai wa watashi tachi ga nani wo hanashite iru ka wakaranai, she murmured, her breath warm against Herman's ear. The words hit me like artillery fire. This stupid old soldier doesn't know what we're talking about. The casual cruelty, delivered with such confidence in my ignorance, transformed something fundamental inside my chest. Herman's response came with barely suppressed laughter, his voice equally quiet but perfectly audible to my trained ears. Tenkei takina, America jin. Sekai ga jibun wo shin ni mawate iru to omote iru. Typical American, thinks the world revolves around him. Their shared amusement erupted in soft chuckles, Herman slapping his knee with theatrical appreciation, while Cora covered her mouth in mock politeness. The sound wasn't joyful, it carried the sharp edge of cruelty, the satisfaction of perceived superiority over someone they considered beneath their understanding. The moment crystallized with perfect clarity. 3 encounters, months of subtle disrespect, countless microaggressions delivered with surgical precision, all based on their assumption of my cultural ignorance. They had been playing a game where only they knew the rules, speaking freely in my presence because they believed me incapable of comprehension. I stood slowly, deliberately, my chair sliding back with controlled precision. The movement caught everyone's attention, but my focus remained fixed on Herman and Cora. My voice, when it came, carried the authority of 3 years in Tokyo and the controlled fury of a man who had finally heard enough. Anata tachi no iu koto Wo subete rikai shite imasu. The Japanese flowed from my lips with perfect pronunciation, each syllable precisely articulated. Tiki, de sannen kan honyakusha to shite kinmushimashita. Anata tachi no bureina taido ni kizuite imasu. I understand every word you say. I served as a translator in Tokyo for 3 years. I notice your disrespectful attitude. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, the kind that precedes explosions. Herman's face drained of color, as if someone had opened a valve, his chopsticks freezing midair above his dessert plate. Cora's sharp intake of breath was audible across the table, her hand flying to her throat in unconscious protection. Della's fork clattered against her plate, the metallic sound unnaturally loud in the stunned quiet. Her head swiveled between me and her parents, confusion and dawning realization warring across her features. Chester straightened in his chair, displaying the first genuine interest he'd shown all evening, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The power dynamic in the room shifted like tectonic plates finding new alignment. For months, they had held the high ground through assumed cultural superiority and language barriers that existed only in their imagination. That advantage had just evaporated like morning frost under direct sunlight. My military bearing took full control, shoulders back, hands at sides, direct eye contact with Herman, while maintaining peripheral awareness of everyone else at the table. The height advantage of standing while they remained seated wasn't accidental. It was psychological warfare conducted with surgical precision. Your assumptions, I continued in English, my voice carrying the same controlled authority, have been consistently incorrect. Herman's mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again like a fish pulled from water. No words emerged. Cora's cultural superiority, so carefully maintained through 3 previous encounters, crumbled visibly as she processed the implications of my revelation. The deadly quiet stretched uncomfortably, and I let it. Silence was a weapon I had learned to wield with devastating effectiveness. Each passing second amplified their discomfort, while allowing my words to sink deeper into their consciousness. I reached for my napkin, folding it with military precision before placing it beside my plate. The gesture was final, ceremonial, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of something entirely different. Moving toward the coat closet with measured steps, I left the family frozen in their chairs, stunned silence filling the space where comfortable assumptions had lived just moments before. The familiar weight of my coat settled across my shoulders as I hung it in my own closet, the contrast between the chaos I'd left behind and my orderly home environment providing immediate comfort. My study waited exactly as I'd left it, books aligned, papers organized, military precision evident in every detail. The emotional maelstrom of the evening required processing, and this sanctuary offered the perfect environment for tactical analysis. November 21st dawned gray and purposeful. Coffee steamed beside my computer as I opened multiple browser tabs with the systematic approach of a military intelligence operation. If Herman and Cora wanted to play games based on assumed superiority, they would discover that some opponents come better prepared than expected. Public record searches revealed Herman Watkins Import Elsh Export LLC with surprising ease. Texas business registration, tax liens dating back 18 months. Court filings that painted a picture of mounting financial pressure. The numbers told a story of declining revenue and increasing debt. $2.8 million in obligations against assets that appeared significantly overvalued. My methodical investigation uncovered a critical vulnerability. 67% of Herman's revenue came from a single client relationship with Matsuda Electronics USA. The contract, according to public filings with the International Trade Commission, expired December 31st, 2024. Renewable annually based on performance metrics and client satisfaction. The pieces of a larger puzzle began forming in my mind. Herman's arrogance, his need to demonstrate cultural superiority, the financial pressure evident in his business filings, all connected by threads of insecurity disguised as confidence. My phone buzzed with the first of several strategic calls. Robert Chen, an army buddy from my Tokyo days, now ran a successful electronics import business in California. His voice carried the same easy confidence I remembered from our service years. "Lonnie, it's been too long. What can I do for you? I need information about the import electronics market. Specifically companies dealing with Japanese manufacturers, I explained, keeping my tone businesslike. Professional curiosity about industry standards and competitive practices. The conversation yielded valuable intelligence about market conditions, client expectations, and the delicate balance required for successful import relationships. Herman's business model, while functional, operated on extremely thin margins with little room for error or client dissatisfaction. By November 23rd, I had scheduled a meeting with Milton Ray, an attorney whose office occupied the 15th floor of Austin's financial district. The downtown skyline stretched beyond his conference room windows as we discussed the legal framework for competitive business practices. What you're planning is technically legal, but you need to be careful about tortious interference claims, Milton advised, his gray suit as precise as his legal analysis. Document everything. Keep communications professional. Never reference personal motivations. I don't want to destroy anyone, I clarified, though the distinction felt important to establish. I want to show them that actions have consequences they didn't anticipate. Milton's pen moved across his legal pad with practiced efficiency. Your military background gives you certain advantages in strategic thinking. Apply that discipline to legal constraints. Everything must appear as legitimate business competition. The framework crystallized during our 2-hour session. Herman's business operated within specific vulnerabilities that could be exploited through entirely legal means. Client relationships in the import business depended heavily on trust, reliability, and cultural sensitivity. Areas where Herman's arrogance created exploitable weaknesses. My handwritten plan covered 3 phases of carefully escalated pressure. Phase 1 involved gathering additional intelligence about Herman's client relationships and business practices. Phase 2 would introduce subtle competitive pressures designed to highlight his operational weaknesses. Phase 3 remained flexible, dependent on Herman's responses to earlier initiatives. The moral framework felt crucial to maintain. This wasn't about destruction or personal vendetta. It was about education through natural consequences. Herman and Cora's behavior had been enabled by their assumption that disrespect carried no costs. That assumption needed correction. November 25th brought the first actionable intelligence through a contact at Austin's Chamber of Commerce. Herman's relationship with Matsuda Electronics had experienced several tension points over the past year, including delivery delays and communication issues that suggested cultural misunderstandings on Herman's part. My phone rang as I reviewed my handwritten strategy notes, the sound cutting through afternoon silence like a summons to action. Robert Chen's voice carried excitement, mixed with professional discretion. "I've got some interesting information about your import electronics inquiry," he began, his tone suggesting discoveries that would prove more valuable than anticipated. The pen hovered over my planning document as I prepared to receive intelligence that would transform theoretical strategy into actionable campaign. Robert Chen's voice carried the electric excitement of valuable intelligence as I gripped the phone tighter, my strategic planning documents spread across the desk like battlefield maps. 3 weeks of methodical preparation had positioned me perfectly for this moment, the convergence of opportunity and calculated action. "Lonnie, this is better than we discussed." Robert's tone conveyed professional discretion mixed with genuine satisfaction. Matsuda Electronics just moved their supplier review meeting from December 30th to December 18th. David mentioned they're concerned about consistency issues with their current import partner. The acceleration of timeline demanded immediate recalibration of my strategy. My handwritten notes showed Herman's contract renewal originally scheduled for January 15th, 2025. This development compressed my operational window, but also created enhanced pressure points I could exploit with surgical precision. December 3rd found me sitting in my sedan outside the Austin Chamber of Commerce building at 8:45 a.m., reviewing my approach one final time. The morning air carried the crisp bite of winter, matching the clarity of my tactical mindset. My military training had taught me that successful operations required adaptability within strategic frameworks. The Chamber's International Trade Committee meeting provided perfect cover for intelligence gathering. Maria Rodriguez, the trade relations coordinator, possessed exactly the industry knowledge I needed to complete Herman's professional profile. Her corner office overlooked downtown Austin's financial district, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the territory where Herman's empire would soon crumble. Import-export businesses face increasing quality standards, Maria explained, her fingers dancing across her tablet screen as she pulled up industry reports. Clients demand consistency, reliability, and cultural sensitivity. Companies that can't adapt find themselves replaced quickly. My cover story as a consultant for veteran-owned businesses provided natural entry points for specific questions about Herman's sector. Maria's professional assessment confirmed what my research had suggested. Herman's operation existed on borrowed time, sustained only by inertia and lack of client awareness about superior alternatives. Matsuda Electronics has been particularly vocal about supplier performance recently, she continued, unknowingly providing the exact intelligence I needed. Their procurement team mentioned evaluating alternatives during our last quarterly meeting. December 8th brought my reunion with Robert Chen at Pacific Electronics Distribution. His office occupied prime real estate in downtown Austin's business corridor, modern glass and steel reflecting his company's success. The contrast with Herman's operation would have been stark if Herman possessed enough self-awareness to recognize it. David Matsuda called me yesterday, Robert reported, settling behind his mahogany desk with the confidence of someone accustomed to delivering valuable information. They're accelerating their supplier evaluation process. Seems their current partner has been creating customer satisfaction issues. Robert's intelligence network within Austin's import community proved invaluable. His position allowed him to observe Herman's declining reputation from multiple perspectives. Client complaints, competitor assessments, industry gossip that painted an increasingly unflattering picture. "Would you be interested in an introduction?" Robert suggested, his tone carefully neutral. David values experienced perspectives on supplier relationships. Your military background and industry knowledge could provide useful insights for their evaluation process. The setup materialized perfectly on December 12th at Austin's Executive Airport Business Lounge. David Matsuda, a methodical man in his 50s, carried himself with the precision of someone accustomed to making decisions based on data rather than emotion. Our conversation flowed naturally from general industry challenges to specific supplier performance metrics. Quality control has become our primary differentiator, Matsuda explained, his voice carrying the weight of fiduciary responsibility. Customers expect perfection, and supplier inconsistencies directly impact our reputation. My responses drew upon 3 decades of military logistics experience, providing credible industry perspective without revealing personal motivations. When Matsuda mentioned scheduling meetings with the alternative suppliers, I offered general observations about the importance of comprehensive evaluation processes. December 14th marked the delivery of my anonymous intelligence package to Matsuda's office. The professional business report, compiled with military precision, contained comparative analysis of 5 import suppliers operating in Herman's market segment. Herman's company appeared prominently in the documentation, not through malicious fabrication, but through careful compilation of public performance data, customer reviews, and quality metrics available through legitimate business channels. The report revealed Herman's operation as significantly below industry standards, 23% late delivery rate versus industry average of 8%, customer satisfaction scores of 6.2 compared to market leaders averaging 8.7, and documented quality control issues that cost clients both money and reputation. 3 alternative suppliers featured prominently in the analysis, their superior performance metrics highlighted through professional presentation. The business case for change appeared overwhelming when presented through objective data rather than personal opinion. My phone buzzed with Robert's confirmation call on December 16th. David scheduled meetings with 3 alternative suppliers for next week. His voice carried the satisfaction of a successful operation. He mentioned receiving some industry analysis that crystallized their concerns about current supplier performance. The dominoes had begun falling with mathematical precision. Herman's contract review, originally scheduled for mid-January, had been moved to December 18th. The acceleration of timeline meant consequences would arrive with the brutal efficiency of military justice. Standing in my study that evening, I surveyed the strategic materials that had orchestrated Herman's professional downfall. Military medals caught lamplight from their display case, silent witnesses to the transformation of combat skills into civilian applications. The phone's next ring would likely bring news of Herman's contract termination, the inevitable result of his own poor performance finally meeting industry accountability. Herman's confident baritone echoed through his office as he answered the phone at 8:15 a.m. on January 7, 2025. "Herman Watkins speaking. How can I help you today?" His tone carried the self-assurance of a man who believed his business relationships were unshakable, built on years of assumed cultural superiority rather than measurable performance. The voice on the other end belonged to David Matsuda, and its professional formality carried undertones that should have immediately alarmed someone more attuned to business realities. "Herman, I need to discuss your contract renewal. We've completed our supplier evaluation process." What followed was 12 minutes of devastating professional reality, delivered with corporate politeness. Herman's late delivery statistics, quality control failures, and customer satisfaction scores created an undeniable case for termination. His desperate attempts at negotiation, price reductions, service guarantees, promises of immediate improvement, met the immovable wall of documented poor performance. "The decision is final." Matsuda's words carried the weight of corporate finality. "Your contract terminates January 31st. We'll honor existing orders through that date, but no new business will be processed." The silence that followed Herman's stammered goodbye lasted exactly 47 seconds. "I know, because I was watching from my car across the street from his office building, timing the moment when his professional world collapsed." The satisfaction felt clean, mathematical, like artillery rounds finding their target with precision engineering. Herman's financial reality crystallized with brutal clarity. 67% of his annual revenue, $2.1 million, would disappear in 24 days. His fixed business expenses of $8,500 monthly would continue regardless of income. His personal lifestyle costs of $1,500 monthly suddenly became unsustainable mathematics. The panic call to Cora came within hours. I couldn't hear their conversation, but her subsequent phone call to Della at 3:20 p.m. on January 9th provided all the intelligence I needed about their family crisis response. "Della, we have a serious problem." Cora's voice, which I could hear clearly through Della's phone speaker as I waited in Chester's driveway, carried the tremor of someone whose entire world had just shifted beneath her feet. "Your father's biggest client just canceled their contract." Della's response revealed her immediate recognition of the implications. "What does that mean exactly? How serious are we talking?" "It means we might lose the house," Cora replied, her cultural pride cracking under financial pressure. "We need somewhere to stay while he finds new clients, just temporarily, until things stabilize." The manipulation tactics unfolded with predictable precision. Cora deployed cultural guilt about family duty, emphasized the temporary nature of their request, and painted their situation as a minor setback rather than financial catastrophe. Della absorbed these talking points like ammunition for her upcoming battle with Chester. Chester's resistance proved more substantial than Della had anticipated. Their argument that evening echoed through the thin walls of their modest two-bedroom house, each exchange revealing deeper fractures in their marriage than either had previously acknowledged. "Our house isn't big enough for 4 adults, Chester argued, his voice carrying the strain of someone fighting for basic domestic peace. "Where would they even sleep? What about our privacy?" Della's counterattack employed sophisticated emotional manipulation. "So, you're saying we should let my elderly parents become homeless after everything they sacrificed for our family?" The cultural pressure proved devastating to Chester's resistance. Accusations of selfishness, abandonment of family duty, and failure to understand traditional obligations created guilt that overrode practical concerns about space, privacy, and financial burden. "They're family, Chester. Family helps family when things get difficult. This is temporary, just until Dad finds new clients and gets back on his feet." Chester's capitulation came after 2 hours of sustained pressure. His defeated "fine, but this is temporary" carried the weight of a man who recognized he'd lost more than just an argument about house guests. The power dynamic in his marriage had shifted permanently, revealing Della's true priorities when family loyalty conflicted with marital partnership. Della's triumphant call to her parents that evening sealed the arrangement. "You can stay in our guest room. Chester's concerned about space, but family comes first. When can you be here?" Herman and Cora's relief at avoiding immediate homelessness was tempered by the humiliation of accepting charity from their daughter and son-in-law. Their financial independence, the foundation of their cultural superiority and social status, had evaporated along with Herman's business contract. The moving truck arrived at Chester and Della's house on January 15th, carrying the reduced possessions of two people whose lifestyle had been forcibly compressed into guest room accommodations. Herman's expensive suits hung in a borrowed closet, while Cora's luxury skincare products crowded Chester's bathroom counter. From my position across the street, I watched the physical manifestation of their reduced circumstances. Two people who had spent months dismissing my cultural knowledge and military service were now dependent on their son-in-law's grudging hospitality for basic shelter. The phone in my pocket buzzed with a text from Chester. "Dad, Lonnie, my in-laws moved in today. House feels pretty crowded already. Hope you're doing well." The subtext was clear. Chester was reaching out to the one family member who had demonstrated strength rather than manipulation. His respect for me had grown exponentially since witnessing my Japanese language revelation, while his faith in his marriage had diminished proportionally. Justice felt like watching dominoes fall in perfect sequence, each consequence flowing naturally from Herman and Cora's own choices and character flaws. The rumble of Herman's rental truck backing into Chester's narrow driveway at 7:30 a.m. on February 3, 2025, marked the beginning of what would become the most suffocating period of my son's marriage. I watched from my sedan parked across the street as Herman emerged from the passenger seat like a displaced general surveying conquered territory, his expensive coat incongruous with his reduced circumstances. Chester appeared at his bedroom window, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips, the expression on his face revealing a man who suddenly grasped the magnitude of what he'd agreed to accommodate. His modest two-bedroom house, 1,200 square feet of carefully managed domestic peace, was about to become a battlefield where privacy would be the first casualty. The invasion proceeded with military efficiency. Herman immediately claimed the dining room as his makeshift office, spreading business papers across Chester's table like territorial markers. Cora swept through the kitchen with the authority of someone reclaiming rightful domain, rearranging cabinets and reorganizing Chester's modest pantry according to her superior standards. By noon, the physical transformation was complete. Herman's mahogany desk dominated the dining area, forcing Chester and Della to eat standing at the kitchen counter. Cora's extensive skincare regimen crowded the single bathroom counter, relegating Chester's toiletries to a narrow strip beside the sink. The living room furniture had been rearranged to accommodate Herman's business calls, with Chester's comfortable reading chair repositioned facing the wall. The financial pressure materialized immediately. Grocery bills increased 75% as Cora insisted on premium ingredients for her Japanese cooking. Utility costs spiked with extended showers, constant laundry, and Herman's demand for upgraded internet service to support his job search. Chester's credit cards, already stretched to cover his mortgage and basic expenses, began approaching their limits. February 15th brought the first major bathroom conflict. Chester needed quick access at 6 a.m. to prepare for work, but found Cora occupying the space for her elaborate morning routine. Her 45-minute regimen included meditation, skincare applications, and precise makeup procedures that couldn't be rushed or interrupted. In Japan, we believe morning preparation sets the tone for successful days, Cora explained through the locked door as Chester waited in the hallway, watching precious minutes tick away. Patience teaches discipline and respect. Chester arrived at work disheveled and 15 minutes late, earning disapproving looks from his supervisor. That evening, when he mentioned the morning's difficulties, Della's response revealed the new household hierarchy with surgical clarity. "You should have communicated your schedule better," she said, siding automatically with her mother. "My parents are adjusting to a new environment. A little flexibility would show maturity." March brought escalating financial confrontations. Chester's take-home salary of $4,200 monthly had been adequate for two people living modestly. Supporting 4 adults, with Herman contributing nothing, and Cora's expensive tastes, created unsustainable mathematics. Chester began working 12-hour shifts, desperate to cover mounting expenses while maintaining minimum credit card payments. The cultural warfare intensified daily. Cora's cooking replaced Chester's preferred meals with elaborate Japanese dishes that required expensive ingredients and lengthy preparation. Herman monopolized evening hours with business calls, his voice echoing through thin walls as he pursued increasingly desperate employment opportunities. Japanese conversations between Herman, Cora, and Della excluded Chester from family discussions in his own home. March 20th brought the kitchen territory confrontation that crystallized the power dynamics. Chester had purchased hamburger meat for a simple dinner, only to discover Cora had discarded it, replacing his plans with an elaborate sushi preparation requiring $70 worth of fresh fish. In Japan, children always properly care for their parents, Cora announced, her tone carrying the weight of cultural authority. It's our tradition, our way of showing respect and gratitude. Chester's exhausted response revealed months of accumulated frustration. I'm doing my best to help, but we're all struggling here financially. American families don't understand obligation and respect, Cora replied, her dismissal complete and devastating. Della's intervention sealed Chester's isolation. Your salary barely covers our needs as it is, she said, her words cutting deeper than her mother's cultural criticism. I'm working 55 hours a week, Della. What more can I do? The answer, delivered with casual cruelty, redefined their marriage permanently. You need to find ways to contribute more if you want to support family properly. March 25th brought their most destructive bedroom argument. Lying in bed at 11 p.m., separated by a thin wall from Herman's thunderous snoring, Chester finally voiced his desperation. It's been 2 months, Della. When does temporary actually end? Her response revealed priorities that would reshape their relationship forever. Are you saying we should abandon family when they need us most? After everything my parents sacrificed for our opportunities? I'm saying we need boundaries, privacy, our own space back, Chester replied, his voice carrying the strain of months without peace in his own home. Family comes first, Chester. That's what marriage means, supporting each other's families when they need help. The irony wasn't lost on him. Supporting her family was destroying his marriage, but pointing this out would only prove her accusations of selfishness. He lay awake until 2 a.m., listening to Herman's snoring, checking work emails on his phone, desperate for any mental escape from the domestic prison his home had become. The thin wall between bedrooms seemed to mock his situation. So close to privacy, yet completely exposed to every sound, every reminder that his sanctuary had been transformed into someone else's temporary shelter with no end date in sight. Chester's phone alarm pierced the pre-dawn darkness at 5:30 a.m. on April 12th, a full hour earlier than his previous routine. He dressed in careful silence, desperate to escape the house before Herman and Cora began their morning territorial claims. The coffee shop on South Lamar had become his sanctuary, the only place where he could think clearly without cultural criticism or financial pressure. I had been observing this new pattern for 2 weeks, timing my own coffee runs to coincide with Chester's increasingly desperate need for solitude. His appearance told the story of a man under siege, rumpled clothes, tired eyes, the perpetual slouch of someone carrying burdens beyond his capacity. Café Mundi at 7:45 a.m. buzzed with morning professionals escaping their own domestic complications. The neutral territory provided perfect cover for what needed to appear as accidental encounter. Chester occupied his usual corner table, black coffee growing cold as he stared at rental apartment advertisements on his phone with the intensity of someone researching escape routes. Chester, what a pleasant surprise seeing you here. His head jerked up with the startled reaction of someone caught planning something forbidden. Recognition brought relief mixed with embarrassment, as if his father discovering him researching apartments represented some form of betrayal. Oh, hi, Dad Lonnie, just grabbing coffee before work. His voice carried exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. Mind if I join you? Haven't had a chance to catch up lately. The invitation opened floodgates he'd been holding back for months. As I settled across from him, Chester's carefully maintained composure began cracking like overstressed metal. Things have been complicated at home since Della's parents moved in, he admitted, his fingers drumming nervously against his coffee cup. The adjustment has been harder than anyone expected. Tell me what's happening, son. Sometimes talking helps clarify difficult situations. The words poured out like water through a broken dam. Months of accumulated frustration, financial pressure, cultural criticism, and marital tension found voice in the safety of paternal understanding. Chester described bathroom schedules, kitchen takeovers, privacy invasions, and the gradual erosion of his authority in his own home. "I'm working 55 hours a week just to cover basic expenses," he explained, his voice carrying the strain of someone pushed beyond reasonable limits. "But it's never enough. Della says I need to contribute more, work harder, be more understanding. Every man deserves peace in his own home, Chester. That's not selfish. It's fundamental to mental health and relationship stability." My words hit him like revelation. For months, he'd been told that wanting privacy, quiet, and financial stability represented cultural insensitivity and family abandonment. The simple affirmation that his needs were legitimate created visible relief. "Della says this is temporary," he continued, hope and doubt warring in his voice. "That once her father finds work, they'll move out and everything will return to normal. Sometimes temporary becomes permanent when there's no accountability or timeline. How long are you prepared to support 4 adults on your salary?" The mathematical reality was devastating. Chester's income could sustain 2 people comfortably, 3 with sacrifice, but 4 represented financial suicide. His credit cards were maxed, his overtime hours unsustainable, and his health suffering from constant stress. "Herman's been searching for work since January," Chester said, his tone revealing growing skepticism about his father-in-law's prospects. 47 applications, 12 responses, 3 interviews, 0 offers. At 58, with a recent business failure, his options are limited. The question is whether you're prepared to support him indefinitely while your own well-being deteriorates. The conversation shifted toward deeper issues. Chester began questioning whether his marriage represented partnership or exploitation. Della's priorities clearly favored her parents over her husband, using cultural obligation to justify financial and emotional manipulation. "I feel trapped," Chester admitted, his voice dropping to prevent neighboring tables from overhearing. "Like, I can't say no without becoming the villain who abandoned family in their time of need." "Setting boundaries isn't abandonment, son. It's self-preservation. A healthy marriage requires both partners to prioritize the relationship over extended family obligations." My words carried the weight of experience and wisdom. Chester absorbed them like someone discovering oxygen after months of suffocation. The apartment advertisements on his phone screen suddenly seemed less like betrayal and more like legitimate self-protection. "What would you do, Dad, if you were in my situation?" The question required careful navigation. Too much guidance would seem manipulative. Too little would waste this crucial moment of receptivity. "I'd have an honest conversation about expectations, timelines, and boundaries. If those weren't respected, I'd consider what alternatives would preserve my sanity and financial stability." Chester nodded slowly, processing implications that extended far beyond housing arrangements. His marriage had become a vehicle for supporting his in-laws rather than building his own future. That realization, once acknowledged, couldn't be ignored. "Sometimes we enable people by not setting clear expectations," I continued. "Temporary help becomes permanent dependency when there are no consequences for failure to become self-sufficient." Chester glanced at his watch, recognizing that work demanded his presence, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. The apartment listings on his phone screen had transformed from guilty fantasy into practical necessity. "Thank you for listening, Dad. I needed to hear some of this." As he gathered his belongings and headed toward the exit, Chester moved with slightly straighter posture, as if a weight had been redistributed rather than removed. The traffic light outside caught him in its red glow, and I watched through the cafe window as he stared at a billboard advertising furnished studio apartments. The seed had been planted. Now patience would determine whether it grew into action or withered under matrimonial guilt. Chester's hands gripped the steering wheel outside the law office of Martinez and Associates like a drowning man clutching driftwood. June 18th, 2025, 1:45 p.m. 15 minutes before the appointment that would reshape his entire existence. The manila folder on his passenger seat contained financial documents that represented more than asset division. They were his declaration of independence from a marriage that had become a prison of cultural obligation and financial exploitation. Sarah Martinez's office occupied the 12th floor of Austin's downtown legal district, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city where Chester had slowly lost himself over the past 6 months. The attorney's credentials impressed him: 15 years of family law experience, board certification, and a track record of favorable outcomes that suggested competence rather than empty promises. Texas no-fault divorce streamlines the process considerably, Sarah explained, her voice carrying the professional confidence of someone who had guided hundreds through similar transitions. With documented irreconcilable differences and your preparation, we're looking at a 3-month timeline if uncontested. The numbers painted a stark picture of financial reality. House equity of $45,000 would be split, leaving Chester with enough for an apartment deposit, but requiring careful budgeting. His 401k balance of $78,000 remained protected, while joint savings of $3,200 barely covered immediate expenses. The credit card debt of $14,800, accumulated primarily to support Herman and Cora, would be divided proportionally based on who benefited from the expenditures. I recommend establishing a separate bank account immediately, Sarah continued, sliding documents across her mahogany desk. Direct deposit, personal credit, independent financial identity. Clean breaks require complete separation of economic interests. Chester signed the retainer agreement with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally taking action. The $300 consultation fee felt like the best investment he'd made in months, possibly years. Meanwhile, 3 miles away in Herman's makeshift office at Chester's dining room table, a different kind of investigation was reaching its culmination. Herman had spent weeks piecing together the timeline of his business destruction, driven by the desperate need to blame someone other than his own poor performance for his professional downfall. The pattern emerged through painstaking reconstruction of events. David Matsuda's mention of an industry veteran who had influenced supplier evaluation coincided perfectly with the acceleration of Herman's contract review. Robert Chen's reluctant admission that he'd introduced Lonnie to various business contacts provided another piece of the puzzle. Sandra Kim from the Import-Export Council recalled specific questions Lonnie had asked about quality standards and supplier reliability. Each revelation built upon the previous one, creating an undeniable picture of systematic campaign, orchestrated with military precision. Herman's desperate phone calls to former business associates revealed whispered concerns about his company's reputation that predated any official performance reviews. The anonymous business report that had reached Matsuda's desk showed professional analysis that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of industry standards and Herman's specific vulnerabilities. By July 20th, Herman's investigation had reached its inevitable conclusion. Lonnie had weaponized legitimate business networking to destroy Herman's livelihood, using his military connections and cultural knowledge to execute a revenge campaign of devastating effectiveness. The realization brought fury mixed with grudging respect for the strategic sophistication of the operation. The confrontation came that evening, Herman and Cora arriving at Lonnie's house without invitation or warning. Their desperation drove them past normal social conventions, past pride, past anything except the burning need for acknowledgement and explanation. "We need to talk, Lonnie, now." Herman's voice carried the barely controlled rage of someone whose entire world had been systematically dismantled. I opened my front door calmly, unsurprised by their arrival. Military training had taught me to anticipate enemy movements, and Herman's investigation had been predictably thorough, if ultimately futile. "Come in. I assume this is about your business situation." Herman's face contorted with vindictive satisfaction at finally having evidence to support his accusations. "You destroyed my business. You systematically sabotaged my client relationships using your military connections." "I shared factual information about quality metrics and industry standards," I replied, my voice maintaining the calm authority that had served me well through 3 decades of service. David Matsuda and others made their own decisions based on accurate data. Cora's fury erupted like a volcano finding release. "You took revenge over a few words at dinner. You ruined our entire lives because your feelings were hurt. Respect is earned through consistent behavior and lost through revealed character," I responded, gesturing for them to sit while I remained standing. What you said that evening showed me exactly who you were beneath the polite facade. Herman's desperation drove him to increasingly wild accusations. What we said was private conversation. You had no right to use it against us. Character revealed in private moments defines public worthiness. Your dismissive attitude toward my military service and cultural knowledge demonstrated values that business partners deserve to understand. The philosophical exchange that followed revealed the fundamental difference in our worldviews. Herman and Cora viewed their disrespectful behavior as inconsequential words that should have no lasting impact. I understood them as character revelations that warranted proportional response through legitimate business channels. You manipulated people against us out of spite, Cora accused, her voice rising with each word. I provided accurate information to business professionals making important decisions. Your poor performance record provided the rest. Herman's final desperate gambit revealed his complete inability to accept responsibility. This was calculated cruelty designed to destroy innocent people. This was calculated justice designed to teach respect through natural consequences. You learned that actions have results, words have meaning, and character has value in professional relationships. The conversation ended with Herman and Cora leaving in frustrated defeat, their attempts at guilt manipulation meeting the immovable wall of calm logic and moral authority. They had expected apologies, justifications, or at least defensive explanations. Instead, they received education about accountability delivered with the patience of someone who had already achieved complete victory. As I closed my front door and walked to my study, I noticed Chester's apartment rental applications spread across my desk, documents that represented his own journey toward independence and self-respect. The cycle was completing itself perfectly, each consequence flowing naturally from the choices people had made about how to treat others with dignity and respect. The divorce decree signed on August 12, 2025, represented more than legal documentation. It was Chester's certificate of liberation from a marriage that had prioritized cultural obligation over partnership, financial exploitation over mutual support. The 15-minute hearing in Travis County Family Court concluded with equitable asset division that left both parties free to rebuild their lives according to their own values and priorities. Chester's new apartment in North Austin buzzed with the energy of fresh beginnings. The one-bedroom unit cost $1,200 monthly, exactly $600 less than his previous contribution to the household expenses that had supported 4 adults. His credit cards, no longer strained by Herman and Cora's expensive lifestyle demands, showed manageable balances that would disappear within 8 months of disciplined payments. Meanwhile, Herman and Cora had relocated to San Diego, moving in with Cora's sister in a converted garage apartment that represented the physical manifestation of their reduced circumstances. Herman's part-time retail position at 68 years old provided minimal income supplemented by early Social Security benefits. Their marriage, strained by financial pressure and mutual recrimination over the choices that had led to their downfall, existed in a state of armed truce rather than partnership. The evening of August 20th found Chester and me in my kitchen, working together to prepare a simple dinner that symbolized our restored relationship. The meal planning represented collaboration rather than cultural superiority, conversation rather than criticism, mutual respect rather than manipulation. "Thank you for helping me see clearly, Dad," Chester said as he sliced vegetables with steady hands, his movements reflecting newfound confidence. "I don't know how I got so lost in that situation." "You weren't lost, son. You were being manipulated by people who took advantage of your good nature and sense of family obligation." I seasoned the chicken with careful attention, enjoying the peaceful efficiency of shared kitchen duties. Good people sometimes trust too easily. That's not weakness, it's character. Chester's gratitude extended beyond mere appreciation for guidance. I should have recognized the manipulation earlier, but Della used cultural guilt so effectively that questioning their demands seemed selfish. Sometimes we need distance to recognize patterns that were invisible from inside the situation. What matters is that you found your strength and took action to protect your well-being. The conversation flowed naturally between practical matters and deeper reflections. Chester's promotion opportunities, no longer compromised by financial stress and family drama, offered career advancement that had been impossible while supporting 4 adults on his salary. His social life, previously constrained by household tension and cultural criticism, was expanding through renewed friendships and genuine leisure time. The apartment feels like a sanctuary, Chester reflected, his voice carrying wonderment at rediscovering personal peace. No arguments, no criticism, no financial pressure, just quiet space to think and plan for the future. Our dinner table conversation was interrupted by the mail carrier's late delivery, including a handwritten letter addressed to me in careful script. The return address showed Herman's name with a San Diego zip code, and the formal stationery suggested significant thought had preceded the writing. The letter's tone reflected a transformation that vindicated my entire strategic approach. Herman acknowledged their disrespectful behavior at the Thanksgiving dinner, expressed understanding of why their words had warranted consequences, and demonstrated recognition that their financial difficulties resulted from character flaws rather than external persecution. "Perhaps we deserve this lesson about respect and consequences," Herman had written in careful handwriting. "We apologize for our disrespectful behavior and arrogant assumptions about your cultural knowledge and military service. The business losses were difficult, but they taught us valuable lessons about accountability that we should have learned years ago." Chester read the letter with growing amazement. He actually understands what happened and why. This isn't just an apology, it's recognition that you were teaching them something important. "Justice without education is merely revenge," I explained, folding the letter carefully. "The goal was always to create understanding, not just consequences." Herman and Cora needed to learn that disrespect has costs, but they also needed to understand why those costs were appropriate. The evening concluded with planning for our upcoming fishing trip to Lake Travis, both of us looking forward rather than backward. Chester's enthusiasm for simple pleasures, fishing, conversation, shared meals, reflected someone who had rediscovered the value of authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than cultural manipulation. "You know what's remarkable, Dad?" Chester asked as we cleaned dishes together in comfortable companionship. "This whole experience taught me more about my own values than years of self-reflection could have accomplished. Adversity reveals character, son. You discovered strength you didn't know you possessed, and learned to recognize manipulation you'd been accepting as normal family dynamics." As Chester prepared to leave for his apartment, our goodbye carried the weight of restored relationship and shared victory. We had both learned valuable lessons about respect, accountability, and the importance of responding to disrespect with appropriate consequences rather than passive acceptance. The fishing tackle I pulled from my garage later that evening represented more than recreational equipment. It symbolized the beginning of new traditions built on equality rather than cultural superiority, partnership rather than exploitation, and mutual respect rather than assumed authority. Chester's journey from manipulation victim to independent man paralleled my own transformation from disrespected family member to respected patriarch whose wisdom had guided his son toward freedom and dignity. The cycle of disrespect had been broken, replaced by relationships founded on genuine mutual regard and appreciation for each person's inherent worth and cultural contributions. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.